Welcome to this session on social influence theory by Herbert Kelman. This present module deals with a research that was conducted half a century age. While coming to the context of belief, attitude and consecutive actions of human, we can predict that all the components such as attitude and belief might have been influenced some reference in the world. The human brain is the great central process unit which processes the stored information as codes, symbols, signs, hint diagrams, pictures, images, etc. It has the viable capacity to use these stored information appropriately according to the need of the situation. The process of assimilation and accommodation concept of Jean Piaget helps in concretizing the concepts and relisting the information. While assimilation keeps adding new information into the existing schema or mental framework, the process of accommodation alters the schema or mental framework according to the information. It is evident as a result of assimilation and accommodation process, the learning takes place, but the changes in the belief and attitude of human is not ensured through the cognitive learning theories. While Herbert was arguing the learning is a social by the observation of human in late 1970s, it was well ahead explained and justified by some identified components by a theory, what is none other than a social influence theory posited by Herbert Kelman in the year 1958. Social influence theory. This theory mainly includes three qualitative processes. The influential communication is the main basis of this experiment. This influential communication was subsequently applied to influence long-term relationship of the subjects. The components such as psychotherapy, international exchange and social relation of social group identity were comprised in the process of influential or pervasive communication. The influential communication together with the shared component used as a yardstick and was expanded to analyze the relationship of individual with his or her social system. Through the analysis of the compared relationship of the individual with his or her society, the researcher Kelman come to a conclusion and identified three qualitative processes such as compliance, identification and internalization. The model of social influence. The focus of the influential communication on the belief and attitude continued in his second work also. Instead generalizing influential communication, Kelman identified psychotherapy, socialization and international educational and central change on the conflict resolution efforts. This conflict resolution effort was mainly observed on the domain of former enemy, depth and durability of change rendered by the social influence. The another interesting model of Kelman out of his social influence theory was that the relationship between public conformity to the position which advocated in an influential communication and private acceptance of that position is manifested by attitude change only. He proved this finding through the experiment in which the 7th standard students were exposed to a communication about comics books. In the high restriction condition, the restriction and record structure were given along with limited freedom. In the low restriction condition, the restriction and record structure were given along with greater freedom. After measuring their initial level of attitude, they were asked to write an essay on their views. The surprise in the result was that the subjects were strongly encouraged in the high restriction condition, while conformity was higher in the high restriction group, the attitudinal change was high in the low restriction group. The another interesting model also identified by Kelman, that the experience case such as true believer, brainwashing and thought reform of childhood as the adolescence and adult socialization was not able to be captured between value system. That is why he had come to a conclusion with the three processes of social influences as follows. The one is compliance. It is the act of positive response to the external stimuli, especially to the request offered by the other around us. There may be change in the behavior due to this social influence process, but not necessarily in the attitude. Through his research finding, Kelman strongly advocated that if someone gets satisfaction out of compliance, it might be from the social influence only. If someone is obeying to some condition without any private thought, it is possible only by social influence. For instance, when a guest comes to our home, we used to say welcome immediately, even though they are our enemies. The youngsters used to say hello or good morning or namaste to the elders spontaneously, whether they believe it or not, as they have to obey. The knowingly or unknowingly acquired and socially influenced behaviors, which being exhibited in the different social settings, are called compliance of social influence. Identification. While compliance is the process of change only in the behavior, the process identification is considered to be the changes acquired in the attitude of oneself. For instance, we strongly believe and change our attitude to the stimuli when received from the desired relationship. That is why Kelman explained as the changes in the behavior and attitude that identified related to his personal system of belief. For instance, the advertisement is probably casted by the famous celebrities due to make some desired relations with the social masses, because the desired relationship would have been exist already, help in establishing the relationship and makes changes in the attitude and behavior of the masses. Internalization. This is the main process of social influence, in which individual is preparing him in accepting the norms and standards established in the society already. Kelman beautifully explained this process and standardized suitable justification also. For example, all the responses which get the reward will immediately be internalized among the individual. When some type of behaviors are intended to be expressed in social setting, the mind strongly believes that those behaviors will get reward for the desired nature. Hence, this group of behaviors would have already been internalized in mind due to social influence. Finally, he concealed that the behavior are well coordinated with internalization when they are coupled with rewards. Thus, three social influence processes together make the individual to pattern his or her own behavior system. Social influence is a bridge between individual and social system. The relationship between one individual with his or her society explained by Kelman through an experiment P and O, where the O represents one party and the P represents the other person. Kelman strongly put forth his theory that social influence is the factor relates one person, that is O, to the next person, that is P. The socialization and re-socialization processes are strengthened due to the long term relationship of O and P. The social influential process used to occur in the larger social context, where an individual is influenced by others directly or indirectly. Even the interaction between O and P is always touched by the social influence of this larger society. For instance, the interaction of one person with his fellow passenger in the train or flight, the interaction with the friend, the interaction with the relatives and the interaction with the officials are differently structured by the society, and the individual also ready to enact the role. This is what Kelman has explained in the reconceptualized way, that society, organization and group are generated in the society itself through the social influence of the society to the individual. Once the individual is ready to accept the social conformity, it directs him or her to enact the role as a member of the society based on the social influence occurred. Thus, although Kelman revealed that social influence acts as a linkage between an individual with his society as a whole, the factors society, organization and group influence individual separately, and they direct him or her and according to the environment. Patterns of individual to the social system with reference to the political aspects. There are three important types of political orientations identified by Kelman. The one is rule orientation, the second one is role orientation, and the third one is value orientation, rule orientation. This is the process of compliance with the society roles. Based on the two sources of orientation to the political system, sentimentally the person accepted to be a member or a person in the society. Instrumentally, individual feels that accepting the societal rules protect a person and his interest. Role orientation. This type of orientation is based on the identification process of social influence. In the context of sentimental source, individual feels as a sense of status in involving to perform the role of citizens. Instrumentally, the individual believes that the society contributing to him to involve in performing the societal role. Value orientation. This is the pattern of personal involvement in the political system of a nation based on the internalization process of social influence. The individual gains a commitment to involve in the basic cultural value of society through sentimental aspect. The individual gains commitment to involve in the institutional arrangement through instrumental source, peacemaking process. The three mode of social influence such as conflict settlement, conflict resolution and reconciliation process making peace in an individual. The conflict settlement. This is an agreement of interest between the both parties, that is O and P. Although there is an agreement, the conflict settlement finally depends on the observation of both the parties, outside powers and international organizations. Conflict resolutions. It is beyond the interest based settlement and it depends on balance of power. By this process of peacemaking, both the parties feel committed. As a result of this commitment, new changes in interest, circumstances and leadership will occur. Reconciliation. This is the process assumes the relationship between the parties before it is proved. The important feature of this model is removing the identities of both the parties and move at peace. It is also beyond the pragmatic partnership. This identity change always linked to the process of internalization of social change, interest, relationship and identities. The difference among three stated process of peacemaking helped Hellman to arrive three important tasks that are common for all social entities. To perform the better social activities, the social group must have to protect and promote their interest. It is also mandatory to establish and maintain relationship. Through the processes interest and relationship, one has to affirm and express his identity in the society. While maintaining this interest, relationship and identities, the individual has to follow both the social order and his or her own individual maintenance, because Hellman identified that separately either social order or individual maintenance cannot fully enforce the maintenance of interest, relationship and identifies. Thus, finally he concluded that these social psychological concepts must be performed in the sense of relationship between individual and his social system with a special focus on social influence. Other factors of social influence. From the previous paragraphs, you would have had understand that social influence is a broad term that related to many different phenomena beyond the factors such as compliance, identification and internalization. Let us see some of other major type of social influence that are being an axis in the social influence of human. Conformity. Conformity is a type of social influence involving a change in behavior, belief or thinking of an individual to align with those of others or with normative standards. It is the most common and pervasive form of social influence. Conformity intends to distinguish between two varieties such as informational conformity and normative conformity. In the context of peer influence, a person is convinced to do something that even though they do not wanted to do, but they perceive them as necessary to keep a positive relationship with those peers. Conformity from peer pressure generally results from identification with the group members or from compliance of some members to conciliate others. Minority influence. Minority influence takes place when a majority is influenced to accept the beliefs or behaviors of minority. Minority influence can be affected by the sizes of majority and minority group, the level of consistency of the minority group and situational factors such as prosperity and social importance of the minority influence most often and operates through its informational and normative social influence, since the majority is indifferent than minority. Self-fulfilling prophecy. A prophecy is designated as the truth and adequately influence people either through fear or logic confusion. A self-fulfilling prophecy is a kind of prediction that directly or indirectly causes it to become true due to positive feedback between belief and behavior of oneself, so that their reactions ultimately fulfills even false prophecy occurred. Reactance. Reactance is the adoption of a view of opposing to the view that a person is being pressured to accept, perhaps due to perceived threat to behavioral freedoms. This phenomenon has also been called anti-conformity. While the results are the opposite of what the influencer intended to, the reactive behavior is a result of social pressure. Obedience. The social influence that derives from an authority figure is known as obedience. The Milgram experiment by Zimbardo Stanford's prison experiment and Hoffling hospital experiment are three well known experiments proved obedience, and they all concluded that humans are surprisingly obedient in the presence of perceived legitimate authority figures. Persuasion. Persuasion is the process of guiding oneself or another toward the adoption of an attitude by rational or symbolic means. Robert Cialdini defined 6 weapons of influence: reciprocity, commitment, social proof, authority, linking and scarcity. These weapons of influence attempt to bring about conformity by directed means. Persuasion can occur through appeals to reason or appeals to emotion. Psychological manipulations. Psychological manipulation is a type of social influence that aims to change the behavior or perception of others through abusive, deceptive or underhanded tactics. By advancing the interest of the manipulator, often at another's expenses, such method could be considered exploitative, abusive, devious and deceptive. Propaganda. Propaganda is an information that has no objective and is used primarily to influence an audience and further an agenda. It habitually presenting facts selectively to encourage a particular synthesis or perception, or using loaded language to produce an emotional rather than rational response to the information that is presented. Unanimity. Social influence is strongest when the group preparing is consistent and committed. Even a single instance of disagree can greatly diminish the strength of an influence. Status. Those perceived as expert may use social influence as a result of their perceived expertise. This involves credibility as a tool of social influence from which one draws upon the notion of trust. People believe an individual to be credible for a variety of reasons such as perceived experiences, attractiveness, knowledge, etc. Culture. Culture appears to play a role in the willingness of an individual to confirm the standards of a group. Social impact theory. Like social influence theory, the social impact theory, which was developed by Bibb Latané in 1981. This theory asserts that there are 3 factors which increases a person's possibility to respond social influence. The first one is strength, the importance of the influencing group to the individual. Immediacy, physical proximity of the influencing group to the individual at the time of influence attempt. Number, the number of people in the group. Now, let us summarize the session. Through this, you have learnt the central theme of a model developed half a century ago and how that distinguished 3 qualitative different processes of social influence, that is compliance, identification and internalization. The model, originally geared and experimentally tested in the context of influential communication and was subsequently applied to the influence in the context of long term relationship, including psychotherapy, international exchanges and the socialization of nation and ethical identity. It also has been extended to analyze the relationship of individual to social system, individuals' role and value orientations to a system, which conceptually linked to the factors such as compliance, identification and internalization also explained. It revealed that predicted different reaction subjects to their own violations of social standards, different patterns of personal involvement in the political system, and differences in attitude towards authorities and readiness to be. In a further expansion of the model, 3 approaches to peacemaking in international or intergroup conflict are identified, such as conflict settlement, conflict resolution, and reconciliation. Hope you would have gained great insight on the social influence theory. Thank you for watching this session. See you next time. Until then, bye.